Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 10th of January, 2000. The 9th of January, 2000. That's right, yeah, the 9th. 9th of January, 2017. I was trying so hard to get the 2017 right that I got the 9th or the 10th wrong. I actually wrote it down that way, Miss Susan, as well. But I want to say to all of my listening and viewing audience, belated Merry Christmas, belated Happy New Year. Those of you, I trust that you're still keeping those New Year's resolutions, those of you who have made them. I look at the New Year as just a continuation of the old year, not really any distinction between the two. It just continues on, so that's the way that I view it. But I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. And speaking of those of you in your vehicles this morning, I believe that the cruise ships are being diverted to spots, and as a result of that, you can expect heavier traffic in that area, and we also ask you to be extremely cautious when driving. There are likely to be more pedestrians on the road, even though we expect that those tourists will be taking vehicular transport into the capital, Georgetown, into the center of the capital, but there are some who may be walking on the roads there as well, going to the public beaches in that area, because of course when you have a northwester like we do normally, the south side of the island is much calmer than the rest of the island as well. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Dorrit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on our alternate number, 949-6990, or you can also call us on 949-8037. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Let's look at the headlines. Last weekend, we had a huge international person here in the Cayman Islands with us, well-known Manny Pacquiao, world boxing champion here in the Cayman Islands with us. For those of you who enjoy the pugilistic sport, I trust that you had a great time. We had a groundbreaking ceremony for a new boxing gym in the district of Bordentown as well. For those of you who were able to take photographs with him and enjoy it, want to congratulate you for that. I actually came in on American Airlines on Friday afternoon as well. Pretty full flight. I expected it to be jam-packed, but there were a few empty seats, and you would have thought that with all of the snow and the bad weather in the U.S., that you would have more people on short notice coming down, and I'm sure that we did have that as well. And I also want to mention the fact that when you sit on those airplanes, and especially when it's a flight coming from way north, you're likely to have less Caymanians traveling on those flights as opposed to those coming from Tampa and Miami. Some of our best ambassadors on those flights are people who have visited the Cayman Islands previously. So they want to impress the other passengers on the flight. They want to impress their friends about what they know. So they will talk about the restaurants to go to, the best beaches to go to, and everything else. So we have some really good ambassadors as well. Just to say, we complain, but We have a great island here. We have a great tourism product, and we want to ensure that we retain that as well. And before we go any further, I also want to remind you, if you're still continuing your countdown with me, that we're 134 days, 16 hours, 24 minutes, and 24 seconds away from the 24th of May 2017. And of course, you know what that is, Election Day as well. And at some point in time, we will be talking about the extended registration period. Also, for voters, we want to encourage all of you to get out there and vote. I know that many people are looking forward to the 24th of May 2017. Maybe some are not as anxious for it to come, because as we have seen in several jurisdictions where elections have taken place in 2016, incumbent governments have not done all that well. One example, Turks and Caicos, where the incumbent government is out. By-election in Bermuda, the Progressive Labour Party won a seat. Of course, it was their seat to begin with, but the government was unable to make any inroads there. So not sure whether or not that is a sign to other incumbent governments, but I would say that you really want to get out there, hit the pavement, do your door-to-door work if you really want to get elected. That is my speech for the day. Many more headlines that we could talk about, but that is really not what we're here for this morning. This morning, we're here to talk about the cultural policy that is being developed in the Cayman Islands. And here to discuss that with us this morning, we have MLA Mr. Roy McTaggart, and Councilor. We also have with us Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, who is the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture. And we have Ms. Nancy Barnard, who is
the Deputy Chief Officer.
Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry as well. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC. Thank you very much for hosting us this morning. A very pleasant, cool, and windy morning. Long may it continue. And good morning, too, to the wider Cayman Islands. And hopefully we get some good engagement this morning in the topic we're here to discuss.
Certainly, yeah. We want to have a good engagement in that. And I'm sure that you also want to have a good engagement when it comes to the public consultation and whatever meetings that you're likely to have with the public. In my days, and I won't say how far back it goes, but culture was... In some ways, there's not a precise definition of culture, but one definition that I heard that still continues to stick out with me is that culture is learned behavior, and it's learned behavior over a period of time. So, which means that culture is likely to change from period to period. Yes. Who wants to jump into the definition of culture, and then why is it necessary for us to have a national policy on culture and heritage?
I'll jump in there, OC. Good morning, everyone. And OC, thanks very much for having us on today. We're really excited to be here and to be in the public consultation phase for this policy. And I just want to remind everybody that it's the culture and heritage policy. Yes. The policy document is available on our website, ministryofhealth.gov.ky, and on page 18 of that document, people will find the key words and definitions. In there, we have defined culture as a people's way of being, knowing, and doing, a set of basic assumptions and values, orientations to life, beliefs, policies, procedures, and behavioral conventions that are shared by a group of people and that influence but do not determine each member's behavior and his or her interpretations of the meaning of other people's behavior. And we'll contrast that with the definition of heritage, which is something of value or importance passed down by or acquired from a predecessor or an ancestor, and a recognized cultural identity and roots. So, as you alluded to in your comments, culture is a dynamic situation. It's something that is ever changing, ever evolving. And we thought that, one of the areas the ministry recognized that one of the areas we didn't have a policy for was the area of culture and heritage. And, you've heard me talk before about policies and how it's a guiding document to try and capture our hopes, dreams, and aspirations in the area for the policy. And we recognize that there's a lot of excellent work that's being done by a number of cultural entities and individuals, but there wasn't anything to sort of guide government moving forward with funding decisions, programming decisions, and so on. So that's what this policy is, the first step in doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One question that I would have would be when we look at, for instance, our national conservation legislation, has it taken into account our culture? We see, for instance, in other countries, for instance, in northern, in Alaska, the Eskimos, when it comes to seal hunting and things of that nature, where there has been a carve out to allow them to do limited, restricted amount of hunting. And when we look here in the Cayman Islands, for instance, catching turtle, catching groupers, for cocks and groupers and everything. Does our legislation need, any legislation that we pass that impacts on culture, need to really take those things into consideration?
I don't know if Nancy wants to jump in on that.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start by saying I'm not as familiar with the legislation for the National Conservation Law as someone, for instance, like Gina Petrie-Branks, who really led the charge for that over about a decade or more. But I will say that, first of all, we do need to have carve-outs. It may mean that legislation has to be amended. It may mean new legislation is brought in, because we have faced that where some people are saying they want to do wattle and daub still, but they're not allowed to do the coral. I don't know the whole entire process, but they're not allowed to do some of the using the coral and things like that. But I would have to sit down with people on the the Council for Conservation to look at how we can rationalise whatever we're trying to do with what they're trying to do. The good part is Gina Petrie-Branks is on one of the subcommittees of this whole process, so that there will be tie-in.
And I think in the National Conservation Law, when they're crafting the species preservation plans or the designation of particular sites of interest for conservation, if we have a national culture and heritage policy and some of the action plans that will come out of that, that will help to feed into those processes in a more regularized and formalized way than we would in the absence of having this culture and heritage policy. So, as Nancy said, we are going to need to look at legislation, not just under the area specifically of culture, but all of the areas of legislation that government has, to make sure that the things that we've identified as our goals and objectives through this culture and heritage policy are being woven into decision making and the legislative framework across government.
And what I would also mention too, OC, is that one of the central policy directions that is contained in this this document is actually entitled legislation. And very broadly states that the goal and aim there is the creating and harmonizing effective legislative frameworks for the identification, protection, preservation, and management of our cultural heritage. So looking at all of the legislative aspects of it, and is certainly a major part of component of this policy that will evolve over time.
Okay, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning is MLA and Councilor Mr. Roy McTaggart, Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture, Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, and Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry, Ms. Nancy Barnard. Please stay tuned. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, the conversation will continue, and we will also be inviting you to join in the conversation with us. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I have the pleasure of having in the studio with me this morning MLA and Councilor Mr. Roy McTaggart, Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture, Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, and the Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry, Ms. Nancy Barnard. For the benefit of our viewing and listening audience, I want to read a portion of the foreword by the Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Premier of the Cayman Islands and Minister of Culture and other subjects as well. And he says here, I am pleased to present to you the Cayman Islands National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan 2017 to 2026. This document has been drawn from and put together through existing instruments, strategies, and policies which comprise culture and heritage. Components include the Cayman, and this is the important part that I want to emphasize here. Components include the Cayman Islands Constitution, Vision 2008, and national, regional, and international policies. In particular, I want to highlight the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, because in the preamble of that constitution, it raises many, many issues when it comes to culture, affirmations in terms of culture and heritage as well. Anyone want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much. What we wanted to do, Mr. O.C., was start with the Constitution, with the greatest law of the land. And so it actually starts with the centrality, and that's what's on page 9, the background. It is the centrality of culture and heritage. This is really a social policy. It's a policy for every single individual, both Caymanian and resident, and even long-term visitor in the Cayman Islands. And to some extent, even the short-term visitors will have a taste too. And it says here, in the opening paragraph of the Constitution, the people of the Cayman Islands, recalling the events that have shaped their history and made them what they are, and acknowledging their distinct history, culture, and Christian heritage, and its enduring influence and contribution in shaping the spiritual, moral, and social values that have guided their development and brought peace, prosperity, and stability to those islands. And I've closed there because then it leads into the remainder of the document. So that, sometimes it's good to distill and look at the absolute philosophy behind things, and the Constitution opens with that. And as you rightly pointed out, we took from what was already developed. We took from the Vision 2008, a lot of work was done. That was a massively public consultative document. We spoke with people who were very active in that, developing that document. And we also developed the work that Chief Officer about 12, 15 years ago, Carson Ebanks, Patrice Donalds, and the late Susan Barnes started. And I dusted that off because they got the policy really, really far. It was called the cultural policy. Dusted that off and started work from that. So we weren't reinventing any wheel. We were taking from all these documents.
Okay. Input. Well, let's start in terms of where are we now as far as the document and the consultations are concerned, Ms. Jennifer?
Well, we're now in the public consultation phase. We have a draft policy document that we're now looking for the public to give us their feedback on. And just to sort of pick up a bit on what Nancy was saying in terms of the process, we have a steering committee that's been meeting over the past, just over a year. And we have a number of subcommittees that worked as well to do some research, to put together, in some cases for the first time, I think, some situational analysis around the different areas that the subcommittees were working on. And it was an opportunity, as Nancy said, to very much pick up with the work that had already been done and build on it and use it as a foundation for moving forward. So there were over 70 people who were involved in the various subcommittees in the areas that they looked at. And each of those subcommittees presented a report to the steering committee, which the steering committee considered and used to draft this draft policy. We also had a UNESCO-endorsed facilitator who came down last year and conducted some stakeholder workshop as well as some stakeholder meetings and interviews. And she's been instrumental in sort of keeping us, we think, on the right path. She came with a wealth of experience and expertise in cultural policies from various jurisdictions globally, and we really benefited from her experience and from the guidance that she gave us. But she was very careful to make sure that the information and the feedback that was going into the policy so far was ours. And she just really guided us, and she's a facilitator, and that's what she did. She facilitated the process with us. So there's been a lot of work that's gone on to get to this point, and a lot of people who've been very much involved. And it's really been fantastic to see the enthusiasm from the stakeholders that have been involved so far. I think it reflects that there's a shared belief that the time is, we need this policy. It's long overdue, as Nancy said. Work's been done in the past. We're now at the point where we really want to move it forward and bring it to being approved and finalized. So the draft that is out there now is the policy that outlines the vision, the values, and some policy directions. And there's also a strategic plan. And as Councilor McTaggart has said in some other venues, we want to make sure we get it right. This is the opportunity for the public to review what the steering committee and the subcommittees have arrived at, and to let us know, have we hit the mark? Do you agree with the vision? Do you think that the values and the guiding principles that are captured in this policy document are the correct ones? Is there something that we have missed? When you look at the 7 areas that we've identified for policy directions, do you think we've captured that? And does it really reflect, as I said, our hopes, dreams, and aspirations in the area of culture and heritage for the Cayman Islands?
Will we get a chance this morning to discuss some of those seven areas as well? How close down have we had grassroots involvement in terms of developing the policy? Can we talk about the composition of the focus groups and steering committees?
I'd actually, I was wanting to just go over who was on the steering committee and the subcommittee. So I'll start with the subcommittee chairs, each of whom were drawn from the steering committee. So we split up, there were sort of focus groups, these subcommittees. So we started with land-based heritage, and the chair of that was Cristina Pineda with the National Trust. She's the director of the Trust. Okay. And each subcommittee had between 10 and 15 people on it, okay? So she was an absolute spitfire. That's land-based. Then we had the maritime heritage, and we had the maritime archaeologist who lives here, Dr. Peggy Leshaker-Denton, who's the director of the museum. She chaired that. And then we moved on to the Performing Arts and Festival Subcommittee. That was chaired by Marcia Matu, managing director of CNCF. And then the Visual Arts, Crafts and Creative Industries was chaired by Natalie Urquhart, the director of the National Gallery. Literary Arts and Oral History, super important. That one was chaired by Natasha Powell, our culture policy advisor in the ministry. And last but not least, which is very, very critical, is Legal and Governance Subcommittee. And that was chaired by Tunisia Williams when she was with the ministry, with the legal department. She's now private sector, so now it's chaired by Marilyn Brandt with the legal department. The ones that I haven't mentioned who didn't chair any subcommittees who are also on the steering committee are Jennifer Ahearn, who's the chair, myself, Kimlon Lawrence and her colleagues at the National Archive, Carla Reid, Chair Tourism Attraction Board, Mr. Jerris Miller, President of the Cayman Maritime Heritage Foundation and Cayman Catboat Club representative, Kiva Powell, Ministry of Education rep, Dr. Dalton Walter and Marjorie Rave with the Ministry of Tourism, and Chris Christian, Cayman Traditional Arts, and of course Anita Ebanks, founding museum director, former teacher and librarian, who has been sort of the grandmother of this whole process for decades.
Okay. And we also did a survey as part of the initial, we had some public meeting or an open house when we had the UNESCO endorsed facilitator here. We also did a survey. We had over 600 responses to that survey as well. And the feedback from that survey has been fed into the process. Okay,
excellent. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Roy McTaggart, MLA and Councilor. We also have Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, who is the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture. We also have the Deputy Chief Officer, Ms. Nancy Barnard, and we are discussing the draft National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026. We encourage your participation. Please stay tuned. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, the discussion will continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor, and in the studio with me this morning, we have MLA and Councilor, Mr. Roy McTaggart, Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, who is the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture, as well as Deputy Chief Officer in that ministry, Ms. Nancy Barnard. We are discussing the draft National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026. It is out for public consultation, and that's between the 3rd and the 20th of January 2017. No indications of any extensions beyond that point. Now we know Caymanians like that extension. We all like to say, oh, I haven't had a chance to consider this, to look at it, to discuss it. You know, we need to extend the time so that people can. You have an opportunity now. For those of you who may not be involved in a focus group or who may not want to put it in writing, you can call here on For the Record this morning, and the 3 individuals who are here will take note in terms of what you have said so that it can be taken into consideration. How do you join in that conversation? You can do so by calling us on our toll-free number. That toll-free number is provided courtesy of Flow. That number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 or 949-6990, or you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. So no excuses. Not that we need anyone to just call in to talk, because we have enough conversation going on here now. There's a whole lot to talk about, but I want to extend this opportunity for you to have your say if you feel that this is the medium by which you should express yourself. So please feel free to call. In the meantime, to our panel, what do we say to those persons who will say, why has it taken us so long to develop a policy on culture and heritage in the Cayman Islands when we have had culture from day one and our heritage has evolved over the years?
If I could kick that discussion off, OC, I think the old adage, nothing before its time, is pretty much applicable. But I think, from the ministry's standpoint, it's known for a number of years that this has been, a national policy and strategy has been lacking. It's one of the areas identified in the ministry very early on when culture became a part of it, that we were lacking and that it was needed. What you have right now is a situation where you have the Ministry of Culture sitting at the top, and below it you have a number of, for want of a better word, description, cultural and heritage type entities like the National Trust, Cultural Foundation. But there is no real linkage between the two to provide and overall policy directive and strategy that would drive the relationship and the types of things and programs that that would seek to preserve and to our heritage and culture that exists. So it was definitely identified as a shortcoming within the ministry. But I mean, I suppose too there are other drivers that are bringing it to the forefront at this point in time. I mean, it was mentioned previously that as a nation we rank number 4 in the world in terms of migration, and which I think is a phenomenal statistic.
It is, yes.
It shows you, it tells you very quickly, that explains very quickly and reasonably, quite clearly why it is, to a lot of Caymanians, they talk about our heritage and culture and say that we're losing it and we no longer have it. So I think that and you've heard those calls, you hear it all the time.
Yes.
And I think those are one of the things that have helped to elevate it and bring it to the forefront. You also have a lot of people too. There's, to me, what I see happening in Cayman right now is that there is that bit of awakening that is taking place within our cultural and heritage community. People are starting to take it seriously. They're getting involved. And you see, even at this point in time, people are starting to commercialize it, which is to me is a very step in the right direction. One that shows, I think, our maturity in terms of the overall, culture and heritage of the Cayman Islands. That we're able to take it to that level in our society. So I think it's all of these things coming to play, and they're all coming into play at a very opportune time for us to get this done. And I think that's contributed, to the success of us getting here. I mean, the fact that we're able to harness in a group of 70 people, and over the course of a year to produce this document and to give us this direction, to me is indicative of the interest and engagement that exists in society today to seek to improve and to preserve and to provide this overarching policy and strategy with regard to ensuring that our heritage and our culture is preserved and protected.
Okay. Now we talk about the migration, and obviously what comes with that is the influence of other cultures as well. Will this policy include any accommodation of those other cultures as well and cultural habits?
Yeah, I think, if you look at the vision statement for the policy, it's safeguarding our heritage, living our culture. And I think that sort of speaks to the fact that we recognize that, as Councilor said, that there's increasingly a view that we need to make sure that our heritage is protected, and that we take steps to make sure that we're protecting people who are going to practice it, that knowledge is not lost as we grow and develop as a country, that we have some of the traditional arts and some of the traditions passed on through the generations. But the vision statement says living our culture, and it's a nod to the fact that culture is dynamic and it's changing, and that it's being influenced by so many other cultures. And if you go through and look at the 7 policy directions that we have in the document, you'll see that we do recognize the dynamic nature of culture and the influences that are brought to bear on it.
Okay. Before we get on to the procedures in terms of the consultation itself, let's talk about a few things locally. We have, for instance, our Heroes Day celebration. We have one that's coming up fairly in the next few months as well. Easter, where picnicking is a big thing for us in the Cayman Islands. That's a part of our culture. It's a part of our heritage. I remember as a youngster, Miss Frances Ramon and Mr. Burley Ebanks' wife. I'm trying to remember her name now. Someone may want to call in and remind me. But they would have picnics, and they were held up on Spots Beach, where the cemetery is now, and Coral Bay Villa, those apartments there. We would get on a truck. Usually, I think it was either Mr. Clarence Flowers' truck or some other truck with this wooden benches on there, and everyone would head up there. And I must say, those days, now you hear about kids on the beach, and you hear unfortunate incidents of drowning and stuff like that. Never happened there. Those days we could also walk out there, and when we left and went back home, we carried our little conchs with us as well that we got there also. But again, those are some of the things that we would expect to be identified and policies put in place to ensure that they are preserved.
Yes, absolutely. And I think now is a good time to go over some of the 6 and put them in perspective with the Cayman context, right? So I'm going to go through them quite quickly so that we can get onto the meat of each of them when welcoming calls and so on. But the first one is access, and that's basically ease of access. Now I want us to think about access in all forms, okay? Physical access, intellectual access, access for everyone despite what socioeconomic group they're in. So ease of access and the right to take part in cultural life in all forms of cultural expressions and activities for every individual. The government basically recognises the importance of nurturing people from all walks of life to collectively honour our Caymanian heritage, to respect the diverse and evolving culture, and to have access to and benefit from the right to take part in all forms of cultural expression. That could be as simple as ensuring there's more fiscal support given to allow all museum and gallery entrances free, and ensuring that they have ramps and so on for persons who are physically disabled. The second of the 7 is governance, super important.
I'm going to interrupt you,
Of
Nancy,
course.
because we have 3 callers queued up, and we're going to take those callers right now. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Happy New Year to you.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you, OC, and good morning to your panel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I applaud your panel for the consultative process, but one has to wonder as to for what of our heritage do we really have left? I mean, also you asked a very good question a while ago. You said with all of the, I think, paraphrasing the migrants that has taken place here, the migration, is any of that involved into this policy, into this policy statement? Because I would be quite alarmed if it was. I think if it's Cayman heritage and culture, it should remain just that. Secondly, I can remember this time of the year as a young boy growing up in East End, waiting for the people used to say the first full moon in January to get cocks and grouper. Now you can't even fly over there. We grew up and eating turtle. That was our main staple, the turtle and grouper and stuff. That was our main, especially those in East End. I don't know about anywhere else, because sometimes when you speak to people in West Bay, where I now reside, they come in like that's foreign to them. But that's the heritage that I'm used to in East End, and that's just a small part of it. But the National Conservation Law has come that has changed a lot of those traditions and heritage. So I am wondering if, to a certain extent, what the good people in your studios is trying to do this morning, if it's not a futile exercise for in part, because I think that a lot of our heritage has been taken away from us simply because of outside influence, and that's exactly where we have headed over the years as it relates to our heritage. I'll leave you with that. I know that you have a list of callers, so I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Miss Nancy, the caller has...
Yeah.
Do we have to make a distinction between culture and heritage as well?
I think sometimes
Yes.
they're, of course, are related, but thank you so much, caller. I think you're right, scarily, and it's reflected in here. A lot of our past industries and our crafts are either extinct or in danger of completely dying out. So yes, sir, part of what we have to do is make sure that we promulgate, we develop, we pass on to the next generation. That's going to take fiscal and human resources to pass it down. However, in terms of, I can't speak to the NCL too much, but I know we have to also look at the global view, because the Earth itself is in trouble, okay? The Earth itself, with global warming, climate change, rising sea levels, etc., is in trouble. So we have to step back as well and look at what's best for us as humanity, and then also drill down to the culture and heritage that we're living and sharing here. Thirdly, just want to add that a lot of us, about 50% of us who are Caymanian, right? About 50% of us are Caymanian, who live in Cayman. The rest are people who are permanent residents or, on a work permit. And the 50% that are Caymanian, about 8% on both sides, or even one side only, have heritage going back several generations. So we can't negate the rest of the 40-something% who have family, either son, daughter, mom, dad, sister, or whatever, married into other migrants that have come here from Jamaica, Honduras, Philippines, Goa, India, the United States, Canada, England, and so on, because they too will bring and share. So I don't think it's any sort of hard and fast rules. It's just respecting each other. And I think when we buck up our heritage and really put fiscal and human resources with our heritage and celebrate that, it will ease the strain felt by people who feel as if the heritage is dying out. We need to do more to protect the buildings and the intangible heritage.
Folks?
I was just going to say, in
Sure.
terms of the National Conservation Law and the catch limits on things like groupers and conch and so on, it's a conservation effort that has been put in place to help be able to protect that heritage and those cultural activities of fishing and living off the sea. In the absence, and we've seen this all over the world, where we haven't put in place measures to protect the population, the marine population and the environment, we end up losing it. And so one of the things that the catch limits and so on that we've seen, not just with the National Conservation Law, but with the Marine Conservation Law that preceded it, was with the view of ensuring that generations to come would still be able to go and fish and have the groupers and have the conch and have the lobster.
Okay, when we come back from the commercial break, I want to extend that portion of the conversation a little bit more, Ms. Jennifer, in terms of how do we protect, what we have, and at the same time still allow people to practice what they have practiced in the past, because there's a very fine line, and you have to really try to create a balance there. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Art Connor. My guests with me this morning, we have MLA and Councilor Mr. Roy McTaggart, Chief Officer Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, and Deputy Chief Officer Ms. Nancy Barnard, and they are with the Ministry of Health and Culture. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record, where we're discussing the draft National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026. That discussion has taken place with MLA and Councilor Mr. Roy McTaggart, as well as Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, who is the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health and Culture, and the Deputy Chief Officer in that ministry, Ms. Nancy Barnard. I have an email from one of our listeners, and I will read that. It says, my particular interest is in the preservation of our language. The fact that what would be regarded as our national newspaper, The Compass, is written in American English and not British Standard English is of great concern to me. The Cayman Islands are a British overseas territory. The reduction of a people's language is a major aspect of the undermining of their culture. And the person says that they will collect a copy of the consultation document, and they sincerely trust that the matter of language will be addressed as well. First of all, let's tell them where that document can be obtained.
Well, you can download it from our ministry's website, which is www.ministryofhealth.gov.ky. We'll also make copies available in the Government Administration Building reception area. And they can also come to our public open house. We're having, the first one is tomorrow night, actually, here in Grand Cayman, in the public lobby of the Government Administration Building from 5:30 to 7:30. So they'll be able to pick up copies there as well.
Okay.
Also at all the public libraries from tomorrow.
Okay. And the challenge that language is facing, not here only here in the Cayman Islands, but throughout the world, the whole question of whether or not slang is acceptable. My daughter teaches in New York, and she was visiting over the Christmas, and we were visiting some friends as well and talking about different things. And she was talking about one of her students in her class, and there was a particular word, and they use it on social media quite often. And when she explained to them that is really not part of the English, quote-unquote English language per se, they were really surprised that it wasn't. So that the challenge is there. But in particular, in terms of the Cayman Islands, Ms. Nancy, you want to talk about that?
Well, first I'd like to acknowledge the work that Kevin Goring has done. He's produced 2 books, one on expressions and one on kind of vernacular and phrases, and kind of a dictionary as well. So that is fabulous. But yes, we would love to see more money put into research degrees and so on for a proper linguist, a professional linguist to come and study this and so on. And it's so interesting how Mr. Steve McField called in to one of the other shows we were on last week and talked about how it came about that all the districts had such different accents, and that was a result of the separation. And because we didn't have vehicles back then, it was so there wasn't a lot of interaction sustained. So yeah, we need to celebrate our various the way we talk in each district and do some more studying on that.
Okay. Nothing, Councillor? Ms. Jennifer?
No, just to acknowledge that there does seem to be, and I think it's part of our globalization, and certainly, you mentioned social media and so on, but I do think that we have to remember particularly that we do need to use the British Standard Language, or British Standard English, as the email mentioned, and it is something that I think, certainly I know Nancy at the ministry works very hard to make sure that all of the documents have that in there.
Yes, just to add, sorry to that, I know that caller, I agree. I was quite surprised to see the language of one of our national media outlets change to US English. I didn't, I think it would be more respectful if we stuck with what the language is, which is the British, because we're an overseas territory.
Okay. Let's talk about structures. I have a pet peeve of mine, which was the destruction of the fort, old fort, on the waterfront. Something. Can anything be done about possible getting an exact recreation of that and having it reestablished?
I think that that's certainly one of the challenges that was identified in the Land-Based Heritage Subcommittee, and certainly from a from a planning perspective as well. We don't have robust legislation in place. We don't have a national register of historic buildings and so on. I know the National Trust has been doing a lot of work towards that sort of a system. But one of the challenges is, particularly with the fort, if we haven't got architectural plans or a site plan, if it hasn't been recorded, it would be very difficult to replicate.
What about old photographs? Would that help?
That will help, definitely. And, you can obviously work towards it. But I think one of the things that I expect that we'll see coming out of some of the action plans from this policy is some steps to formalize some systems to identify buildings or sites that are of historic or heritage significance, cataloging them, putting things in place to try and make sure that we protect them. And it might not be to the same extent. You hear about some of the systems in the UK, for example, where if you have a heritage home, you literally can do nothing with it under the legislation there. There's going to be varying degrees. There's going to have to be some flexibility, I would imagine, in any system that comes forward. But certainly I think that's one of the challenges, and it's come up time and time again in the discussions at the steering committee level, I think in the subcommittees as well, our built heritage and how we can protect it. And something we've talked about on some other, when we were on Talk Today last week as well, is we have to recognize the pace of development that we've experienced, the growth that the country has had, and the timescales that we're talking about. Some of the places that we can look to and say, well, they've done a great job of preserving their heritage buildings or their heritage sites. Well, they have, hundreds, if not 1,000 years of history to draw on, and they probably had a lot more buildings disappear than we've had in terms of, they had a lot more to work with, I guess, in terms of the numbers, just the sheer size of the pool available to them. So, we do have an opportunity as we move forward with some of the action plans to draw on the experience of some of those other jurisdictions who've got some of these established systems in place. But, we do have to recognize that as a country, we've got 500 years, give or take, and the rate of growth that we've seen in that time is probably unparalleled anywhere else in the world.
What about those edifices that are in private hands? What do we do to encourage people to preserve them, and sometimes it may be to their financial detriment, and what can government do about that as well. But we have 2 callers, so we're going to try to at least take one before the break and ask one to probably hold on. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, Mr. Osei, and morning to your panel. It's Johan Moxon.
Morning,
Morning.
Mr. Moxon.
Hopefully everybody had a good weekend.
Yep, thank you.
Just want to start off by saying thank you very much to everybody on the steering committee at the ministry level and everybody that has thrown their efforts and shoulder to the wheel. I think what you guys are doing is very, very important. But I wanted to just ask a question to see if it was possible to add to the entire effort. If you look at the panel, you have Mr. McTaggart, MLA McTaggart there. His family have been here since the beginning of time, it feels like. You have Mrs. Ahearn. You have the Deputy Chief Officer as well. Now, some would consider them to be new Caymanians, so on and so forth. But I was just wondering if in this effort we could somehow incorporate a component that teaches that, and as pro-Caymanian as I am, Cayman is evolving, culture is a beautiful thing, but I think the collage and the mixtures of the different types of people that have come here, made Cayman their home, and have made some really fantastic contributions. I was wondering, and I know it might not be the politically popular thing to do, if there was any consideration given to just adding a component whereby we accept and we own the fact that Cayman and Caymanian culture is now a rainbow, for the want of a better word, whereby we encourage people to hold on to where they came from, but they've been blessed and fortunate enough to be called Caymanians by whomever, and as long as the law says so, it doesn't matter if you're first generation or a 20th generation Caymanian, you are Caymanian. So I was just hoping that we would take this opportunity to sow the seeds of unity and say that being Caymanian isn't just eating turtle. I love turtle like anybody's business, no doubt, but I'm just saying in 2017, we've reached a point where the kids that go to school with my kids, they don't look anything like Ebanks's, Bush's, Borden's, blah, 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 blah. And for us as a country to grow and to be unified, we have to accept that Cayman culture is many things. It is our strong foundation with the beautiful add-ons that we've had over the years. So hopefully you guys can speak to that. I'm not trying to be, cheeky in any way. I just think this is an opportunity whereby we can finally remove the stigma of you are driftwood, I've been here forever, so on and so forth, because we're talking about something that is beautiful, that is pure, that binds us all, which is Caymanian culture. Also, when you guys talked about the buildings and a registry of buildings, hopefully Smith's Cove and other areas will be identified as national, for the want of a better word, monuments, so that we never have the sort of headaches that we've had over the years. Just my contribution, and again, thank you very much for your
and
effort.
caller, before you go, what you talk about in terms of the welcoming of others and embrace, and acknowledging their culture as well. The acceptance, the welcoming nature of Caymanians, that's a part of our culture and heritage as well. Yes. We have to take a commercial break now. For the record, we'll be back shortly. If we have any callers on hold, we're asking them to be very patient. Quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going straight to the phone lines. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing the draft National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017-2026. We have one caller, and as promised, we're going straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Orit. Good morning.
Morning, my good friend. How are you? Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and all that is. I hope that you're in good health.
Yes, I am. And good morning to your panel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. You mentioned a while ago, you mentioned about the picnics, and you mentioned about Miss Francis and Mr. Burley Banks and all those people.
Yes, Mr. Burley's wife. Remember, what was her? I can't remember her name.
Miss Dolly.
Miss Dolly, yes, Miss Dolly. Yeah, that's it. Yep.
And you and then there was a magic word that came up in the conversation about access. Well, I wonder if the plan that your guest is putting forward includes the right that the 19th century prescription law gave Caymanian people, to preserve their tradition of going to the beach, picnicking, hauling up their boats, drying their nets, and swimming, and for any other recreation. I wonder if the plan includes that, because that is part of our tradition, and it's hundreds of years old. And I wonder if, because there's a lot of controversy now about people blocking off the beach, and keeping us from our tradition of going to the beach. I wonder if that, because, and the reason why I raised that is because the government doesn't seem to have, and not only this government, neither government seem to have any indication that they are going to preserve those accesses and prosecute people who actually destroy those prescriptive rights, because those rights are indefeasible. It means that you cannot they cannot be turned back, and they cannot be taken away. I wonder if the plan, if the strategic plan has any position on that, to keeping those open. And secondly, I am writing stuff about Georgetown and stuff, and I wonder if the strategic plan has any information about the cultural significance of Scranton, that little district right behind the administration building.
Yep, for Georgetown. In terms
I
of
wonder
Georgetown.
I wonder if they know anything about the cultural significance of Scranton, because I think somebody mentioned that one of the components of getting the plan of this together is because we're losing our culture. Well, I think they've lost that in Scranton, but that was a significant part of the black culture. Not only the black culture, Georgetown culture, I should say, and Cayman. I wonder if they have any information on that, because if they do, I would like to get that, if it's official.
Well, Dr. McField, I know, and this is one of the things that I envy you for. I know that you spend a whole lot of time at the National Archives, and
I do.
I wish that I could spend more time there. My question would be, how would you like to contribute in terms of the development of this policy, in terms of your research, what you have been able to determine, and how can you get involved in that in terms of attending the meetings and stuff like that? Ms. Jennifer, how could Mr. McField, Dr. McField, get involved?
Well, certainly, we would welcome any contributions that he wants to make to us. We do have a feedback form that's available online. We do have the public meetings, the first one being tomorrow night, which is Tuesday, the 10th of January, from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Government Administration Building. And we would just welcome any feedback he has on the policy, but also information that he might want to provide that we can make sure gets put on the record. Because we, as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, the subcommittees have put together some situational analysis reports. If he's got some information in one of those areas that he wants us to append to that report, I know that we would certainly welcome that.
Dr. McField?
I went to one. I was invited to one of those meetings, but I didn't like the format of how it went, because it seemed to me that the whole idea of what the outcome was going to be was predetermined, and I didn't like that at all.
How can they reassure you that the outcome isn't predetermined?
And when I went there, the decisions. All the people who were the top people who determined what was going to be in the strategic document was already determined. And I think that I didn't really like that, because I wanted to see an open book where myself and some other people who attended the meeting, I don't know if they went back at all, could have participated from the inception and not come in when the decision was made. So I don't think I want to participate into that sort of thing.
But that would be unfortunate, Dr. McField, because we wouldn't want to lose your expertise, and this is something that we want to use to draw us together rather than pulling us apart.
Well, it seems to me that there are some people who decide what is best for Cayman. And once that decision is made, other people are excluded. They're important what they think is best for Cayman, and I think that battle line that has already been drawn, and I think I don't think that it's going to be solved on the radio or on this talk show.
Okay.
But the problem is that from the inception, the decisions were made from the inception, and then we had to go along with what was already determined. And I thought that was high-handed, and I didn't take part anymore.
Okay. Point well taken. Anyone want, Ms. Jennifer, you want to address that?
Well, I would just like to emphasize to everybody who's listening that the document that we've got for the public review right now is a draft document. Mm-hmm. It's by no means set in stone. We are looking for the public to give us their feedback and their comments to make sure, that, as Councilor has said in other forums, that we've got it right. We, obviously have to draw on the feedback that we've had from the people who've participated in the process so far. But we do recognize that not everybody has had that opportunity, which is why we have the public consultation, and we give the public that ability to review the document, see the work that's been done to date, and provide us their feedback on what is being presented to them. So I'm a bit surprised that the perception was that it was a predetermined situation, that some decisions had already been made. I think that the process that we've gone through, it's been a very iterative process in many ways, and certainly, the direction that we had from Cabinet when they appointed the steering committee and gave us the green light to proceed with the policy process was to make sure that we go through and get as much information together as we can from as many different sources, distill it down into what you see before you today, but to make sure that we do come to the public to say, here's what we've arrived at based on the research that's been done, the discussions that have been held, the process that we've had so far. Let us know. It's a gut check, it's a reality check. What do you think about the vision? What do you think about the values? We've identified these policy directions in the document. Do you think we've got it right? Have we missed something? And I know that, and perhaps Councillor wants to speak to this, but the Cabinet and the caucus, they're waiting for us to come back to them to say, this is what the public has told us. That this is not a fait accompli, it's not a done deal. It is a draft document for consultation, and we really need the public to engage to let us know. Have we got it right? Have we missed the mark? Do we need to add anything? Tell us what you think.
That measure of flexibility is there. It's nothing cast in stone.
Absolutely. The other thing I'd like to mention, because he did touch on it, and I know it's something that's a burning issue in our country right now, and that was the whole issue of access to the beaches. And that is one of the underlying policy and strategies as well for this, is access to all forms of culture in the Cayman Islands, whether it's physical or visual or whatever it is to ensure access. But more specifically to the point he raised of the beach accesses and the erosion of those rights there, that is an issue that is front and foremost right now with the government. It's one which they're actively working on to try to address this situation. And whether it results in legislative amendments or just a reclaiming of these rights, I don't know where we're going to get to, but I do know that the Ministry of Planning is working on that right now. And we were promised by, I wouldn't say promised, but we're told by the Minister that it is front and foremost in their minds at this point, and they're actively working on it.
Just to add, I do apologise that Mr. McField felt that way. I think, by way of explanation to our listeners, I think what happened was somebody on that Legal and Governance subcommittee that I co-chaired with Tanisha Williams on Legal Department, somebody recommended that he be joined, and it was a bit later. So we had actually met a few times before he came on board, and he attended, I think, one of the 5 meetings approximately that we had. So I do apologize he had that experience. It was probably because we had gone a little bit way down the road before he came on board. But yes, they wanted him added because he's such a vital historian and studied a lot about the slave ancestry and so on.
Yes. Okay. I have one email from one of our listeners, and I'll read a portion of it on air. The other part of it I'll read off air because it has to do with a request to the ministry for support in relation to a project. But he says, the caller or the listener says, why now are we discussing our heritage and culture when we have been strolling to go forward with this? This would happen. The screen would go when we were strolling to go forward with this for about 20 or more years. I think we earlier talked about why now. We see, for instance, that it's only in 2014 that Bermuda, for instance, and we always try to compare ourselves to Bermuda, where one minister in the Bermudan Parliament talked about a policy that was being developed, and it would have been brought forward in the year 2014. And as far as their history is concerned, Bermuda goes farther back than we do.
I think Councillor spoke earlier about an awakening that he's seen, that he feels is going on in terms of why now. And as Nancy mentioned earlier, this is a process that's been bubbling away in various stages for decades, and it's just we've picked up that work and we've moved forward with it. But
yeah, I would say, and I say this very cautiously, I just hope they don't mean it as a criticism of what's being done here and now, but because really, regardless of what happened in the past, it's here today, and this is where we are. We've picked up that ball and we've run with it, and we're to that point. So my plea really to the public is, let's embrace it, let's get behind it, and let's get involved in it. Provide your feedback. Let's finalize this as a way forward for us.
Yeah, we don't want to wait another 20 years.
We don't want to leave another 20 years, and we're still here. We're back here, and we're all a lot grayer and discussing the same thing. So, I mean, I'm grateful to the ministry and to everyone who has participated to get us to this point, and look forward to hopefully seeing this being finalized and implemented.
Minister, Councillor, I'd like you to talk about values and the spirit of the policy for our audience, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think getting back to what one of the previous callers what previous caller before we went to the break was talking about, and the I'm trying to think of what his particular point was. They're promoting the diversity that exists in our culture today. Yes. I mean, he was spot on, hit the nail right on the head. We talk about our heritage, that in effect is our past, that is fixed. But the culture itself is ever evolving and ever changing. And what exists today in terms of our culture isn't what it was 20, 30, 50 years ago. And the policy speaks, the values of the policy and the spirit of the policy seeks to embrace that in talking about fostering social inclusion, building peace building, honoring our past, nurturing the arts, culture, and heritage, and ensuring that status and support for artists, creatives, and cultural workers at all levels of our society. So, we all of these values and the things that they speak about are all enshrined or being promoted in this overall policy and strategy for heritage and culture, or culture and heritage.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of people's thinking, I know I've heard people remark when they see other nationalities displaying their national flag, making displays of patriotism when their particular country is successful, maybe in a sporting event and other things. And sometimes we as Caymanians will say, look at that, they're here in the Cayman Islands and, they're flying their flag. But we need to adopt that approach ourselves, grab the mantle and promote what is Caymanian and what those things that are successful, in Cayman as well, rather than sitting back and complaining about it.
Yeah, no, and I have to agree with you completely. I mean, we need to take more pride, I think, and embrace that as well. I mean, my flag, Cayman flag, flies proudly at my home, and I think about it. If you went to a sporting event and the only thing that was there was the Cayman flag, it might not be as much fun if 100% of the people who were there were just supporting the Cayman side. It's that diversity and differences, I think, that brings us all together and makes Cayman what it really is. And it's all important. I mean,
You spoke earlier, O.C., about the welcoming nature of Caymanians and, how that is part of Cayman's heritage and culture. And, I think one of the things that that we'd like to see come out of this policy is as some ways to sort of formalize and promote that pride in our heritage, that pride in some of our traditional crafts. Some of the other values that we have are intergenerational dialogue, transmission, and knowledge sharing, and research-driven innovation and sustainability. The more that as a country we can promote and opportunities to participate in our culture and opportunities to preserve and promote our heritage, both the tangible and intangible, I think that will be a tremendous outcome to be able to see. And the more opportunities that we have in that area, then I think you'll see more of the new Caymanians, the visitors and residents embracing and helping us along the way. If there's an activity, if there's a a traditional craft or so on that we're putting in place the means to be able to promote that and increase the pride in it, increase the transfer of knowledge to generations, I think we'll see it continue to grow.
Okay. Ms. Nance, I know we interrupted your discussion to take a call, and we're talking about the policy directions, I think it is. Can we go back to that?
Yeah, sure. So we were on legislation, and
I'm going to interrupt you again. We have one call, so and we always try to put our callers first because we have the last word on the mic. So let's grab the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, O.C.
Good morning, sir.
Nice to hear you back, man.
Good to be back too. Thank you.
That's nice. I will have a healthy, prosperous, and spiritual new year.
Same to you. Thanks.
To you and your panel.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Morning.
Okay. My name is James Sterling Banks, better known as Jimmy. I tried a couple of times to get my idea across for
Smith Cove
back there program, the development of that, the design of that. I have a beautiful design for that particular place. I don't think you're going to find anyone like it. Okay, now listen to what I have to say about it.
Okay, I want you to be brief about that, but what we're going to encourage you to do is to attend one of those meetings. I think you're still in Northside, and we'll find out whether or not there will be any meetings held in Northside as well. But go right ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, okay. Now, that particular project, I have one of the best designs you're going to find anywhere in this world for that. I don't care who is a good designer, trust me. The design for that is a design with history. It's about 4 sections of history right down in that. Number 1, Cam Jackson is an icon. He's been around for a long time. He have my father's cat boat, which been around before Cam Jackson and me also as history. You got Mr. Paul Hurlston, who is a seagoing captain. You got Miss Georgette Ebanks, which is a well-known lady in this country. Now, that place can be set up with through Cam Jackson. I can do it. I never checked it yet, but I can get it done. Cam Jackson, Mr. Paul, and Miss Georgette. Cam Jackson cat boat. She is portable. We can get the 3 of them on the cat boat, bring them around to Smith back there from South Sound if necessary. Get them to pose on the boat. Take a picture of that boat. And those people in it, don't tell them they're too old to get into the boat. No, they can laugh at that. Trust me. That's history now. You look at my way of looking at history now. And picture that. Make that the design for Smith back there. Trust me, you will never find another design with it.
Okay. Do you have a contact that you can provide to our panel here that in the event that they may want to contact you, Jimmy. I tell you what, rather than giving it publicly on the air, we're going to pass you back over to Miss Susan, give her the number, and she will pass it on because they would like to contact you, about your idea.
Susan got my number twice already, but I'll give it again.
Yeah, give it to her, and then she's going to pass it. She's going to pass it on to them so that they can get in contact with you. And I want to thank you very much, for that, and wish you best of luck, and hope that they at least take on your idea, if not all of it. Part of it as well, which brings me, ladies and gents, to the whole thing about we see in other countries, for instance, reenactment of certain incidents that took place in those countries, Civil War reenactment in the United States and things of that nature. Those are things that we would be looking at as well in terms of, bringing our culture and our heritage to the forefront and preserving it.
Thank you, because we actually didn't have that in there. So I've just put a big star beside that to add that. Yeah.
That's a good point. Great
I'd
point.
like to respond to something Mr. Johan Moxham said earlier. I think it was him that was talking about the sites. Well, a few of us have raised sites like Smith's Barcadere and so on. And beach access is critical to Cayman. It is what we are known for. We can go and plunk ourselves in front of any hotel once it's a certain feet up from the high water mark. I think it's very important, and I think it's not just about the tangible heritage, it's intangible, it's access, it's sites, and it's not just sites and monuments, it's also streetscapes. Like Elizabeth Street is one of the most beautiful little streets in West Bay. Boggy Sand Road, South Church, and of course everyone in their district has their street. So it's streetscapes and sites, and that to me is one of the most critical things that we have to protect. Absolutely have to start looking at the legislation for planning, and I'm really grateful the Chief Officer did her stint. She's a planner, I believe.
Which brings us to the question again, that very delicate balance between development and the challenge, the demands of development, and the retention of the historical aspects of that we have.
Yeah, there's a number of different opportunities in that area that as a country we can be looking at and investigating feasibility of. There's things like stewardship agreements where if somebody is fortunate enough to own a property, whether it's a site or a building that has some historical value or some heritage value to it, they can enter into agreements with the government to preserve that they'll get some other benefit on in return with the agreement. There's also opportunities like alternative development standards and looking at whether we can incorporate some flexibility into some of the site planning requirements and so on to help preserve some of the traditional aspects. And also, I think, one of the things that when I worked at planning, which was a number of years ago now, that they had been talking about and we had been talking about was if you look at some of the traditional architecture, some of the traditional design, some of the traditional way that buildings were oriented on the sites, there were some functional reasons for that, whether it was, the covered porch to shade the windows and keep the house cool, whether it was the way that the building was sited on the site itself to try and capture the prevailing winds, so there's opportunities, I think, as we go forward and as we recognize, and I think one of the key things here is, recognizing the value that our heritage, not just our built heritage, our intangible heritage as well, but recognizing the value of it, increasing the appreciation for it, and identifying opportunities to preserve and promote it.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, Councilor, MLA and Councilor, Mr. Roy McTaggart, Chief Officer, Ms. Jennifer Ahearn, and Deputy Chief Officer, Ms. Nancy Barnard. But I'm told that we have one caller and we can actually accommodate that caller before we go to the break. So let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Good morning, caller. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I heard Nancy talking about Elizabeth Street. What we must not forget, and I will be submitting something shortly.
Excellent.
I haven't heard all the program, but anyway, I'll make my point. We must not forget that West Bay Central, that is in the Four Winds section, that was the West Bay commercial section. You had all the shops there, such as, Mr. Lewin's shop, Mark Nee Farrington's shop, Mr. Prentice's shop, and it goes on and on.
The Cop Hall.
The Cop Hall.
Don't forget that.
You shouldn't forget that. And
Yes.
Cap Mike had the jukebox, the Saturday night dance, and it goes on. And as a matter of fact, it went right up to, I think, near the post office of Mr. Spurgeon's shop. I think that was considered, the more commercial area. So we must not fail to forget things like that. And about the beach accesses, I'm glad to see that some progress is being made, because we, the concerned citizens, well, everybody knows that, how we've been pushing for that. And we must not forget the history of the West Bay Road either. Okay?
Thank you very much,
Thank
caller.
you. I'll hang up and listen.
And speaking of that, I think Captain Paul Hurlston and others have developed a hand-drawn map of old buildings in the Cayman Islands, where, especially in Georgetown, where they were located and stuff like that. And I think Captain Paul's name was mentioned in terms of, one
he
of
was
them,
actually
so
on our
that,
land-based subcommittee.
Yes, so
that was
because
chair.
he has that map as
Sorry,
well.
our maritime subcommittee.
He has that map as well.
Just to respond to the caller, absolutely. I didn't mention that, but that road is absolutely magical. And if we can get some fiscal resources into, and Nurse Leela's is on that, if we can get some fiscal resources into maintaining those, whether they're privately owned or publicly owned, the streetscape, and ensuring walking tours continue, because decades ago, the National Trust developed walking tours of various districts, and I still have that little booklet. So these are all things, and this is about bringing this to the district level to make sure that everybody has the power, every individual, and then every neighborhood, like somebody else mentioned Scranton, every district, and then up to national.
Okay, we're going to take that commercial break now. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor, and we're discussing a very, very important document for the Cayman Islands. That document is the Draft National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands, 2017 to 2026. We have never had any sort of consolidated documentation of our culture and our heritage. We have several books written about the Cayman Islands, but we have nothing in terms of a policy as far as our culture and our heritage is concerned. This is an opportunity for all in the Cayman Islands, Caymanians as well as others, to get involved in the process, and we're encouraging you to do so. And before we get some final comments, I'm going to make one more attempt with Miss Nancy to see if we can at least go down the list of policy directions. Miss Nancy.
Right. I'll start off, right. Thank you, OC. I'll start off with what Jennifer was discussing earlier. Policy direction number 5 on page 24 of the document, ensuring that culture and heritage concerns are reflected in development policies, plans and actions. They do not have to be mutually exclusive. It's okay to have them one aspect look at the other aspect, and that's what's been missing to a certain extent so far. The Government of the Cayman Islands recognises the powerful role which culture and heritage plays in contributing to and meeting sustainable development goals. So the rate of development, it's been massive, and there's another sort of development pull going now. It will be tempered with due consideration for all aspects of our culture and heritage. Then skipping back to policy direction 4, developing education, and that's early childhood, primary, secondary, tertiary, and research degrees and human resources to encourage awareness, innovation and professional development in the fields of culture and heritage. Using the ethos of lifelong learning, culture and heritage will be promoted through early childhood, etc., through apprenticeship, that's critical, scholarship and research opportunities, and very critical because it's very much a topical conversation, through employment opportunities and professionalization of the sector, not just for the culture and heritage sector, but if we focus on human resources in the big picture, and the Workforce Development Agency's work and Ministry of Education's Employment and Gender Affairs work, we can see how, going back to what the Chief Officer said, if we focus a lot and celebrate and promulgate our heritage and have pride and celebrate it, it will be harder for people, right, who may want to knock it, or may say, I've seen some comments on CNS, oh, that won't take long, i.e. our discussion. Yes, we only have 300 years versus thousands of other countries, but yes, it will take long. We have a rich, rich heritage and rich, diverse mosaic culture. So going on to policy direction 6, and there are 7 of the directions. Status of the artist. This is the first time it's been done here, but it's an international status of the artist is in an international position, which is the promotion of the status of the artist and the freedom of cultural expression. And that's giving artists, assigning them, and this will take a few years to develop, but status of the artist to various artists and craftspeople who may not be able to work commercially, but who feel a calling. Bendel Hydes comes to mind. He's one of our greatest artists, and he shouldn't have to be worried about how to put bread on the table if he's not selling paintings. He's creating something that is just phenomenal, that reflects our culture and heritage. So it's a national registry of artists, which again the gallery has started, but putting more gravitas to that. Working with the ministries that's developing the intellectual property and copyright laws, and the artist, a seer and innovator, encouraged to explore imaginative and groundbreaking mediums of expression through protection of the rights to express themselves in keeping with the Constitution of the Cayman Islands. And going on to the last one is enterprise, critical, because we have 2 main pillars of economy. One is finance and one is tourism, and we have to make sure that our product for tourism has integrity. And our craft markets, our festivals, we have a promulgation now of arts. Poinciana, CI Film Festival, various fashion festivals and fashion shows. And what we need to make sure is to somehow capture with the Economics and Statistics Office, who we're working with closely, to make sure that we capture proper statistics that are measurable, quantifiable, that we can say, you know what, this is how much of the GDP this kind of creative industry puts in. And I just want to give a shout out to Luigi Moxon, because his 345 was one of the early starters of this kind of, we can make money off of this.
Idea. Yes. Okay, one of our listeners has written in and says, the new cultural and heritage policy is admirable. Says, for too long, we have allowed our heritage to be subsumed at the expense of physical development. Without a policy of protecting what is left of Caymanian heritage and culture, we will be an endangered species, and what attracted visitors and guest workers will soon be lost forever. We are now even laughed at when we eat our national dish. Newcomers need to be properly oriented before they are let loose in our society. Only then will our way of life be understood. It would seem that the more dominated cultures amongst us, let's see if I can paraphrase that. It would seem that the more dominant cultures amongst us, amongst our objective is to make Cayman like their homeland. Any policy needs to curtail that. I think we're saying the exact opposite of that, or maybe not the exact opposite, but we're saying that we need to take those cultures into consideration and allow them to operate in the Cayman Islands alongside, our culture as well, but not that our culture should be dominated. If I had that wrong, please correct me, or if you want to add to that, Ms. Jennifer.
I think I'd draw back to the vision statement, which is safeguarding our heritage and living our culture. I think we talked at the very beginning of the show about the distinction between heritage and culture. And we've also talked a lot about the importance of making sure that we find a way to record, to embrace, to promote, to promulgate our traditional heritage and some of the traditional activities, the tangible and intangible, with a view to making it easier for people who are visiting the islands, people who have moved to the islands, to learn and to know more about what is our heritage, and recognizing that as we continue to grow as a country, as we age and our history, the length of our time increases, our culture will evolve and it will change. But I think this is an opportunity for us to try and put in place some policies, some action plans to make sure that as we experience that growth and change, as we see the evolution of our culture, that we are safeguarding our heritage.
Okay, we're getting pretty close to the end of the show now, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to get those final messages that you want to get out to our listening audience in terms of encouraging them. We'll start with Ms. Nancy, then Ms. Jennifer, and then finally with the councillor.
Mm-hmm. Right, so thank you so much for having us, OC, and it's very, very important to get inside the homes of everyone and to get feedback. We've made copious notes here today that we will try to include. It's very important to have everyone's feedback. When we started this process, we did say, look, everyone has their baggage to bring, and we need to be open and honest with that. My personal baggage is that I am a newer Caymanian, but newer by older Caymanian status, but not newer for me because I came here as a baby from Jamaica. So we just need to be cognizant of the fact that as Caymanians, like all of us sitting in this room right now, we all draw on different heritage and background and mix with so many different nationalities every day. And so yes, this policy and strategic plan is for everyone, but one of my passions is because I realize that I am not someone here of heritage and I'm not someone here that has generations back. My passion is twofold. Number one, to make sure that those people have a voice. And again, Ray Banker would engage in really exciting conversation about that. And the second thing is our built and intangible heritage, to protect and preserve that and carry that forward. Thirdly, to ensure peace, to ensure this whole process is done respectfully and peacefully, that we can engage in conversation like we have today with nobody being disrespectful to each other.
Okay, Ms. Jennifer?
I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's been involved in the process to date. Nancy and team at the ministry have worked incredibly hard to get to this point. And I know the members of the steering committee and the subcommittees, they dedicated a lot of time and effort to their work to get us here. So big thank you to everybody who's been involved with that. But now, as we've discussed, this is the public's opportunity to make sure they weigh in. We've reached the point where we have a draft policy, we have a draft document, and we really need the public to let us know their feedback. We want to know if you think we've captured what we need to capture, if you think that the values are correct, and if there's any areas or priorities that you think we've missed, or whether you agree with what is being proposed. So please, please, please take this opportunity to get involved and to give us your feedback. We really want to make sure that we've got it right. We mentioned earlier we've got some public meetings coming up. The first one is tomorrow night, which is Tuesday, the 10th of January, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. That one will be here in Grand Cayman at the Government Administration Building. We'll be in Little Cayman and Cayman Brac next week. Thursday, the 19th of January, we'll be at the National Trust House in Little Cayman from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 19th. And then we'll be in Cayman Brac at the Aston Ruddy Centre from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. That's next Thursday, the 19th. You can like our Facebook page, Ministry Health and Culture. You can get the document on our website, www.ministryofhealth.gov.ky. There is a questionnaire, there's a feedback form. Please take some time, review the policy, and give us your feedback so we can make sure that we've got it right.
Okay, now what about the districts? Have we done anything in the individual districts?
At this point, we haven't scheduled open houses in the districts. It's something that we're discussing. We've been hitting the airwaves over the last few days, and we're going to have a little sit down probably later this afternoon to talk about what next steps might be and whether we need to have some formal meetings in the districts or whether we're going to look at some district focus groups. So that's something that we're actively considering.
Okay,
good. Well,
Councillor?
Just like to thank you for hosting us for the past 2 hours, and really to encourage the listening public to get engaged. This is your time to speak, your time to be heard. Please give us your feedback. We do have the chief officer mentioned the feedback form that we have. While there is a space there, a part there is for free form responses in terms of whatever it is that you want to provide feedback on, but there are some specific things that we're asking the public to weigh in on because they're so important. They are so central to the success and the implementation of this policy. We want to know, did we get the right definition for culture? Did we get the right definition for our heritage? Is our vision statement right? Is or all of these sorts of things. Because if we've got it wrong, I mean the effects of it could be quite significant to us as we move down the road, because this is a document really, I think, that would last us and affect us for generations. And I think it's that important that people look at it and give us your feedback, and let's move forward as a country.
Yep. And this is something that we can't ask Google,
No.
for. We need to get it, hear it directly from the people, not Google. You can't
Absolutely.
Google it at all. And don't forget to get Jimmy Ebanks' number. He has called on the show several times. I don't know how many, if anyone has taken him up in terms of at least hearing him out and seeing what he has, but he obviously believes that he has something of importance because he keeps pushing it, and we wouldn't want him to be ignored in this instance. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to encourage you on behalf of our panel to get involved in this consultation process. Put your views forward. For those of you who have any apprehensions about doing so, may I again encourage you, to do so. This is a time to move forward, and this is a time when this is something that should bring us together as opposed to dividing us. And the only way that we can come out with a complete document and a complete policy is by having everyone's input in that as well. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. To say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman, which is also part of our culture and our heritage. Join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for talk today. Have a great day, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to continue to bless these three wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.